August 12, 1976, 4:47 p.m. The Dakota Building, 72nd Street in Central Park West, New York City. 7th floor. John Lennon chases his 10-month-old son Sean through the narrow hallway that connects their apartment to the building's upper levels, following the determined toddler's unsteady exploration of spaces that have become familiar through months of careful supervision. Sean moves with the fearless curiosity of a child who has not yet learned to distinguish between safe rooms and dangerous heights, between family spaces and building infrastructure that might contain hidden hazards. The Dakota Building is a labyrinth of corridors, service areas, storage rooms, and forgotten spaces that reflect more than 90 years of continuous habitation by people wealthy enough to afford privacy and eccentric enough to modify their living arrangements according to personal whims rather than architectural logic. John has spent 18 months learning the building's geography, mapping its stairwells and service elevators, discovering which doors lead to neighbors' apartments and which open on maintenance areas that most residents never see. But today Sean has found something new, something John has never noticed despite his careful exploration of every space where his son might wander. At the end of the 7th floor hallway, behind a door John assumed led to storage or mechanical equipment, Sean has discovered stairs leading upward to what appears to be another level of the building, a space that does not appear on any floor plan John has seen. John scoops Sean into his arms, examines the door more carefully. It is unmarked, painted the same color as the hallway walls, designed to blend invisibly into the building's architecture. The lock is old but well-maintained, suggesting regular use despite the door's inconspicuous appearance. John tries the handle, finds it unlocked, pushes it open to reveal a narrow staircase ascending into darkness. The stairs are carpeted, recently cleaned, leading upward to a landing that receives light from sources John cannot identify from his position in the door. Someone maintains this space, uses it, keeps it accessible to people who know of its existence. But John has lived in the Dakota for 18 months without learning about this additional level, without seeing other residents use these stairs, without receiving any information from building management about spaces above the apartments he believed occupied the highest floors. Sean babbles contentedly, reaching toward the stairs with the instinctive desire to climb, to explore, to discover what exists in spaces adults have hidden from his investigation. John hesitates, torn between his responsibility to keep Sean safe and his own curiosity about what the building contains beyond the areas designated for resident use. He decides to investigate, carrying Sean up the stairs slowly, testing each step for stability, listening for sounds that might indicate the presence of other people in whatever space exists above them. The staircase curves as it ascends, following the building's architecture, leading to a landing that opens onto a corridor similar to those on the residential floors, but clearly serving a different purpose. The corridor is lined with doors, but these doors bear numbers rather than apartment designations, and the numbers follow no sequence John recognizes. Door 1963, door 1965, door 1967, door 1969. Years, not room numbers. Years that correspond to specific periods in the Beatles' history, to albums and tours and events that defined John's public life before he retreated into domestic privacy. John approaches door 1963, finds it unlocked, pushes it open to reveal a room that makes his blood run cold. The space contains recording equipment, tape machines, microphones, and filing cabinets arranged as if someone has been conducting ongoing archival work related to music from that specific year. But more disturbing, the room contains photographs of the Beatles taken during 1963, including images John has never seen, pictures that appear to have been taken without the band's knowledge during private moments in hotel rooms, recording studios, and backstage areas. Sean squirms in his arms, eager to explore the equipment, to touch the tape machines and microphones that represent the technology John used to create the music that made him famous. But John holds his son closer, sensing that this room represents something far more dangerous than nostalgic preservation of Beatles history. He moves to the filing cabinets, opens the first drawer, finds folders labeled with dates from 1963, recording sessions, concert performances, interviews, private meetings. Each folder contains transcripts, photographs, and reports that document the Beatles' activities with the precision of intelligence gathering rather than fan enthusiasm or journalistic documentation. One folder, labeled Lennon Personal, March 1963, contains transcripts of conversations John had with Paul, George, and Ringo during the recording of Please Please Me. But these are not official recording session transcripts or authorized interviews. These are word-for-word records of private conversations between band members, discussions about their personal lives, their fears about fame, their relationships with each other that they believed were protected by the privacy of closed recording studios. John opens another folder, finds photographs of himself taken in his Liverpool home during March 1963, pictures showing him with Cynthia and infant Julian in moments of domestic intimacy that no photographer was present to capture. Someone had been monitoring his private life, documenting his family relationships, creating a comprehensive record of his personal activities while he believed he was living outside public scrutiny. He carries Sean to door 1965, finds a similar room equipped with more sophisticated recording equipment and containing documentation from the year the Beatles released Rubber Soul, and began experimenting with more complex musical arrangements and lyrical content. The 1965 room contains evidence of surveillance that extends beyond simple documentation of public activities to include monitoring of the creative process itself. Tape machines in the 1965 room contain recordings John has never heard, versions of Beatles songs that include conversations between takes, discussions of political topics, personal revelations that occurred during the informal moments when the band believed they were speaking privately. Someone had been recording not just their music, but their thoughts, their relationships, their evolution as artists and as people. The 1965 files contain psychological evaluations of each band member, analyzing their personality changes, their political development, their potential for influencing public opinion through their music. John's file describes him as increasingly political, potentially dangerous if his influence over young audiences continues to develop in anti-establishment directions. Door 1967 contains the most sophisticated surveillance equipment John has seen, clearly government-issued, rather than commercial recording gear. The 1967 room documents the period when the Beatles released Sgt. Pepper, and John began making public statements about war, peace, and social responsibility. The surveillance from this period is comprehensive, including not just audio recordings, but film footage of private conversations, psychological analyses of John's political evolution, and strategic assessments of his capacity to influence anti-war sentiment among young Americans. One document from a 1967 files stops John cold, a report titled Lennon Neutralization Protocols that outlines various strategies for limiting his political influence, including relationship disruption, creative interference, legal harassment, and, if necessary, permanent solutions. Sean begins crying, sensing his father's tension, responding to the change in John's emotional state with the sensitivity that connects children to their parents' psychological condition. John bounces him gently, trying to maintain calm while absorbing the implications of what he has discovered, a comprehensive surveillance operation that has been documenting his entire adult life, analyzing his political development, planning interventions to control his cultural influence. Door 1969 contains documentation from the year the Beatles released Abbey Road, and John began his relationship with Yoko, the period when his political activism intensified and his commitment to anti-war causes became central to his public identity. The 1969 files reveal that his relationship with Yoko has been monitored from its beginning, that their bed-ins for peace were recorded and analyzed, that their collaborative artistic projects have been studied for their potential to inspire political resistance. But the most disturbing discovery in the 1969 room is a collection of tape machines containing recordings that have not yet happened, conversations John has never had, events that belong to his future rather than his past. The tape labels bear dates from 1977, 1978, 1979, 1980, years that exist only as possibilities, as time John hopes to spend raising Sean, creating music, living the quiet domestic life he has chosen over public activism. John plays one of the future tapes. Here's his own voice discussing plans to return to music, conversations with Yoko about ending his retirement, decisions about resuming his public career. But these conversations have not occurred. These plans have not been made. These decisions represent possibilities he has not yet considered. Someone has been predicting his future choices, planning responses to actions he has not yet taken, preparing interventions for political activities he has not yet resumed. The future tapes contain more than predictions. They contain what appear to be recordings of actual future conversations, complete with environmental sounds, emotional nuances, and interactive details that suggest these are not simulations, but genuine documentation of events that somehow already exist despite not having occurred in any timeline John recognizes. One tape, labeled December 8th, 1980, contains a conversation John has never had, but recognizes with sickening certainty as authentic. His own voice, older, more tired, discussing his fears about returning to music, his concerns about political threats, his love for Sean, and his determination to protect his son from the consequences of his father's fame. The conversation appears to be taking place in their Dakota apartment, but it is a version of their apartment that contains details which do not currently exist, furniture they have not purchased, artwork they have not acquired, modifications they have not made. Sean falls asleep in John's arms, exhausted by the afternoon's exploration, trusting in his father's protection, even as John discovers that protection may be an illusion, that their lives have been monitored and analyzed and predicted by people who possess technology and knowledge that transcends normal surveillance capabilities. John listens to more of the future recordings, hearing conversations between himself and Yoko that reveal intimate details about their relationship, their hopes for Sean's future, their private fears about the forces that continue to monitor their domestic life. But these conversations have not occurred. These revelations have not been shared. These fears have not yet been acknowledged between them. The technology required to create such precise future documentation exceeds anything John knows to exist, suggests capabilities that transform surveillance from observation of actual events to prediction and perhaps manipulation of future choices. He begins to understand that this hidden floor of the Dakota building contains not just evidence of past monitoring, but infrastructure for controlling future decisions, for ensuring that his choices align with expectations determined by people who view his potential return to public life as a continuing security threat. As dawn inches closer, John remains on the hidden floor, no longer searching frantically, but moving with a slow, deliberate calm that frightens him more than panic ever could. The shock has settled into something colder, analytical. He understands now that this place was never meant to be stumbled upon by accident. It exists because at some point, someone anticipated this exact moment, the night when curiosity would overpower resignation. He opens drawer after drawer, each revealing fragments of a life he thought he owned. Psychological profiles updated annually, behavioral deviation reports, notes on his use of silence as resistance, on his tendency to retreat rather than confront when overwhelmed. Even his periods of domestic peace are framed not as victories, but as containment successes. The language is chilling in its neutrality. No malice, no admiration, only management. One file stops him completely. It contains references to events that have not yet occurred, projected interviews, hypothetical lyrics analyzed for political risk before they are even written, potential public statements evaluated for destabilizing potential across different geopolitical climates. His future is not being predicted. He realizes it is being rehearsed. Every path mapped, not to understand him, but to prepare responses before he can act. The deeper he goes, the clearer it becomes that withdrawal was never an escape. The Dakota was chosen not because it offered privacy, but because it offered control disguised as safety, a fortress that doubles as an archive. His retreat into fatherhood did not remove him from observation. It merely shifted the lens. Sean's milestones are already documented in abstract terms: influence, inheritance, symbolic continuity, secondary cultural vector. Even innocence has a file. What terrifies John most is the realization that some of the people he trusted may not have betrayed him consciously. Recruitment, he sees, does not always mean consent. Sometimes it means proximity. Sometimes it means convenience. Sometimes it means simply being left in place while the world quietly rearranges itself around you. This is not surveillance meant to stop a crime or prevent violence. This is surveillance designed to shape history by limiting spontaneity, to neutralize unpredictability, to ensure that when John Lennon speaks again, the world hears only what has already been accounted for. He finally understands why exhaustion has followed him his entire adult life. The deep, unshakable fatigue of pushing against invisible boundaries. Why even rebellion has often felt pre-approved. Why peace itself has carried the faint aftertaste of permission. Yet here, surrounded by proof, something shifts. These rooms are not just instruments of control, they are evidence. They confirm that his instinct for never paranoia, that the sense of being watched was not delusion but design. And evidence, once removed from its hiding place, has a way of destabilizing even the most carefully managed systems. John knows exposure will not look like heroism. It will be framed as instability, obsession, perhaps even danger. The machinery he has uncovered is sophisticated enough to discredit him while presenting itself as protection. But truth, he realizes, does not need immediate belief to be dangerous. It only needs to exist. Upstairs, Sean sleeps untouched by any of this for now. John understands with painful clarity that he cannot permanently shield his son from a legacy built on attention and power. But he can disrupt the inheritance. He can force the watchers to react instead of anticipate. He can reclaim uncertainty. The choice is no longer whether he is being controlled. That question has been answered beyond doubt. The choice is whether he will continue to live as a managed outcome or risk becoming an uncontrolled variable. As he leaves the hidden floor, sealing the unmarked door behind him, John knows one thing with absolute certainty. The most dangerous thing he can do now is not to disappear, but to speak. And somewhere deep within the system that has monitored him since before he understood his own significance, new calculations begin, adjusting for a possibility they can no longer comfortably contain.